Hi, this is Paul Sanneman with Business Success Tips, where we teach contractors how to make more money in less time and have more fun. I have Moshe Cohen, I'll get it right, who's a negotiator, which is interesting because most contractors think they don't need a negotiator until it's too late. So Moshe, tell them about what you do and how you do it.
So, I do a number of things that all relate to this field. I do a lot of coaching and training to help contractors negotiate more effectively, whether it be with owners or subs or others that they have to interact with. And I'm also a mediator, so I get in the middle between parties in dispute and help them work things out when things do go off the rails, which unfortunately they do sometimes.
Okay, so I've been in this business 40 years. Make sure you know, I will tell you the number one problem my contractors have had, without a doubt, the big number one, not getting paid. That's a biggie, right? So I have a client right now. I'll give you this example. Okay, here's a case study. Can't tell the guy's name. My client, John, all right, has been working with this guy for a year and a half. He's built a million and a half dollar house, something like that. We're down to the last 100,000, right? This guy doesn't want to pay, right? My client owes his subs 80,000, and this guy's been difficult from the beginning. His wife's even worse, and so my client is saying, "Okay, we're done. You owe me the $100,000," and they're going, "I don't think so. I think you made some mistakes. It didn't work. I'm willing to pay you like $25,000." How do you negotiate that?
Well, I think I'm a big fan of preventing problems rather than trying to fix them after the fact. So to some extent, this was preventable when John already saw that this client is difficult from the get-go. That means that you give the client less rope, that you insist on more frequent payments, that you insist on sign-offs that are all along the process. If I work with you and you and I have a good business relationship, I do a lot of business on a handshake, right? You and I, we know to trust each other. I know you're going to pay me in the end. I can give you a whole lot of rope there. But if a contractor has the sense that this is a difficult client for some reason or another, what you want to do is, first of all, prepare really good agreements in advance. Right, actually spend some time and some money on an attorney to help you draft good agreements, so you prevent some problems, and so you tie the client's hands before you do any work. All along the work, you do check-ins, you do sign-offs, you do the work in smaller increments and make sure you get paid in smaller increments, and you try not to get yourself into the position where you have a $100,000 payment at the end of the project and you have very little leverage at that point. Because especially if you're dealing with clients who have a lot of money and who can afford to drag things out and litigate and essentially bankrupt you on the way to court, if you've gotten yourself into that position, you're going to have to accept pennies on the dollar, and that's going to be very difficult for you.
Right. I mean, I've seen that happen. The thing is, is it cheaper to pay you or have my attorneys fight it? I mean, that's a question they have to make, right? And a lot of times it's cheaper to have their attorneys fight it than pay them. I have one client, just as an example. He met with a client, right? This is probably something we're talking about. And the first thing the client told him was, "I just did this awesome thing. My daughter had a wedding. It was I don't know, $100,000 wedding. It was amazing. It was at a Hilton. I argued that with the Hilton, and I got him to give it to me for free." That's what it was, the first conversation you had with my client, right?
So this person prides themselves on being a tough negotiator.
Right.
So a good question to ask at that point is, so what do we need to do to ensure that you don't try to get me to do this for free?
That's right. That's true.
So, people will say things like that, and people are, proud of the fact that they're strong business people. And by the way, there's nothing wrong with asking the hotel to do it for free if the hotel chooses to do that. And the hotel might have good business reasons why they choose to do that. right? This person might have $1 million worth of corporate work they can give them if they give them the wedding for free.
Right.
And you don't know the full story there. But if you don't have confidence dealing with people, look, business is done with people. And I'm a strong believer in developing trust and in building business with people that I want to do business with. There are some people I just want to do business with. And,
So how do you find out? Let's say you're meeting a client, you're in the very beginning of the relationship. How do you find out if their self-worth is based on their ability to get a deal?
So, first of all, there's nothing wrong with them being able to get a deal as long as they do it ethically, right? If they negotiate with you and they get you to give them a good price, bully for them. I have nothing against that. If they come to an agreement with you and then go back on that agreement and don't pay you, that I have a problem with, right? So that's two very very different things. I mean, someone could be a good negotiator and negotiate a good price.
Okay, that brings another point. Moshe, how do you become a good negotiator? How do you learn how to do that?
Well, so there's a lot of resources out there. The first thing is nothing beats practice. And I think a lot of people don't feel comfortable negotiating. So
now, does that include practice with your kid and your wife or another business person?
Every conversation is a negotiation. I just think of negotiations as conversations, though they do play out differently in different circumstances. But I think a lot of people are uncomfortable with the whole concept of negotiation, so they try to avoid it or they try to rush through it.
Good example. Like if I'm going to buy a car, my wife is going to buy it because she learned from her father. She loves to this whole make a deal thing, right? With a car dealer. I just say, what does it cost? And I write a check and I'm done. So I'm not a good negotiator. So how do you learn that? I mean, she learned it from her dad who loves to do it. She loves to do it. How do you learn to like that?
So first of all, you don't have to like it. You just have to be good at it. Right.
Okay.
And part of that is just practice. When I bought my daughter her first car, or actually I helped her buy her first car, we went to a bunch of dealerships before we went to the one where we actually bought the car. And I said to her as we were walking in, we're not buying a car here. We are just practicing. And went through the motions with the dealership, looked at cars, drove them, haggled a little bit, said thank you, and walked out. And then we did this at a couple more dealerships. And the idea is to get used to the process, to get used to how you're feeling through the process.
So what is it? I'm curious, what does that process look like? I mean, negotiation sometimes has a bad connotation in a way, right? It comes like you're trying to get a deal or you're a haggler, or, we all think about when we go to the border and the people come up to want to sell us a blanket or whatever, and we hassle with it. So some people love it and some people hate. How do you learn to do it? Just practice? And are there any rules for it?
So, there's different settings where negotiation happens, and the negotiations actually play out very differently. And I don't think of negotiation as haggling. Haggling is a really tiny portion of negotiations.
Okay.
The main skill you need to use in negotiation is listening. Right? I'm going to find out what you care about. I'm going to find out what you're looking to get out of this negotiation. And by understanding your needs, I'm going to be able to negotiate a solution that meets your needs and maximizes my own.
So what's the difference between a negotiation and an argument?
I'm not trying to convince you of anything. I'm trying to find out your needs so I can meet your needs and maximize my own. So
I mean, because I to me, that's a subtle difference. I mean, I've been in some arguments in my life and I've been in some negotiations. And I don't think most contractors ever took a negotiating course in their life, is my guess. So what does a negotiating course look like? I mean, how do you practice? Do you put a bunch of people in a room and they say, whoever gets the thing for the lowest price wins? I mean.
So I'll give you an example of mine. All right. Because I do these day-long negotiation, classes for contractors.
Great.
The first exercise we typically do is we look at what challenging negotiation looks like. And I give them a scenario where someone is faced with a really tough counterpart that is challenging them in a bunch of ways. And we ask, what are the challenges and what are some tools you can use to manage those challenges and influence this person's behavior? And I share with them some different ideas and different frameworks and skills on how to influence someone's behavior.
But what does that look like? I mean, someone told me that if you leave a negotiation, both feel like they got a bad deal, it's a good deal.
So the saying, as I heard it, is that a good negotiation leaves both parties equally unhappy.
Same kind of thing, right?
Um, I'm not a huge subscriber to that, because that means that both had to compromise. And I think that in some negotiations, you're not looking to compromise. You're actually looking to find a solution that meets both parties' interests. Look, I'm going to do business with you if it makes sense to you and it makes sense to me. All right. That's the fundamental thing. And if it doesn't make sense to me, there's lots of people I can do business with. I don't have to do business with you. So all negotiations occur in light of the alternatives available to the parties.
So
Right?
most contractors negotiations, I'm going to say over money. They're negotiating a contract, they're negotiating an employee salary. It usually has to do with some form of money. So tell me about your class. How do you get a contractor to be better at negotiating?
So one of the things that we do right after that first exercise is I do an exercise where I pair people up. And in each pair, there's a buyer and a seller. And buyers are trying to get a low price and sellers are trying to get a high price.
Welcome to the world. Absolutely.
And we give them 15 minutes. They negotiate with each other and we look what happened. Some people bought high, some people sold high. And then we look at the negotiation process about how do you set this negotiation up for success? What kind of conversations do you have before you get into the substance to put the other person in the right frame of mind so that you can get the information you need and you can negotiate effectively.
So I'm assuming that trust is useful, right? Because if you don't trust the other guy, it's probably hard to negotiate with it, right?
Oh, absolutely. But in these competitive negotiations, there's no assumption of trust. I mean, this would be the blanket at the border that you mentioned before. Like, you don't trust the person, they don't trust you. But the question is, do you chit chat with them for a few minutes ahead of time to kind of put them in a different mood? And if so, can you use that to your advantage? So that's the setup. Then what you do is you need to think about what you're going to ask for. And generally, people undershoot. People don't ask for enough. And one of the reasons we don't ask for enough is because we're afraid we're going to lose the business, right? You're in a competitive business. But the truth is, it's only competitive-ish. I'm going to work with whoever I think is going to give me a house I want to live in. And, it's like I don't go to the cheapest dentist in town. I go to whoever was recommended. And if they charge a little more, I might try to negotiate a price down. Usually I don't. But even if I did, I'm not going to go away from them to the cheaper dentist.
Well, it's interesting that people don't negotiate with their dentist. You don't go to a dentist and say, okay, the bridge is going to cost you $4,000. You go, nah, that's so much. I can go down dentist down the street. Can you give it to me for $3,500? They don't negotiate with it. It's just not done, right? But contractors, car dealers, somehow it seems so negotiation is the model.
It is, which means that you therefore have to anticipate people are going to negotiate with you. And therefore you need to leave some room in your pricing to negotiate. Now, you don't want to leave too much room because that loses credibility.
So let's talk about enough room. I'm specific. Let's say I'm a contractor. I'm doing $100,000 kitchen, right? And I've added, most contractors add in small add like 35% for a small kitchen, right? If you're a big home, you're looking at 15% on 3 million, but say 45%. I give you should I start at 50 and go down to 45? I mean, should I start high and go low, or just say the price is the price?
Look, there is no always do, never do. But I would say if you anticipate that people will negotiate with you and will try to bring you down, what you want to do is you want to start high, but you want to justify it. So when you come down, you also change the scope a little bit, right? I don't negotiate my fees, for example, but I'll negotiate my fees together with the scope. So if you ask me, let's say for a set of workshops, I will quote for you the most, the most sophisticated, tailored, workshops that involve a lot of preparation on my part. And I might say to you, okay, it's going to be $50,000 for this set of workshops with all of the preparation that goes into customization. And you say, whoa, I can't do that. I was looking for something more like 20,000. I say, well, it sounds like you don't really want the full customization. If we don't customize these pieces, I could give you a better rate, right? So you're negotiating.
You basically mess with scope, right?
Yes. And
because if you don't mess with scope, I think the person feels like they sort of got cheated, because you say, this is going to be $100,000. And then you say, I'll pay 90. And you go, okay, take 90. They go, well, why'd you ask me for 100 in the first place? Right? Are you trying to take advantage of me?
Exactly. But if you link it to scope, then you say, well, if you want these kind of windows, it's going to be this price. For this other kind of window, I can give you a different price. Or if you want it done in this time frame, it's a rush job, I can do it for this price. If you're willing to extend the time to this other date, I can give you this other price. So, and since very often there's information asymmetry, you got to remember that as the contractor, you know more about the process, you know more about what goes into the pricing than they do. You can build in scope items that you can then remove in a way that's credible.
Okay, I've learned in scope, you don't want to put anything they can find on Amazon. I mean, if you know what I mean, like you're not to negotiate the price of a stove, because they can go look at a price of a stove and go, that's bullshit. I can buy this stove for whatever less at Home Depot or something, right? But something like framing a door, moving a wall, something that you really can't go and price on the internet is probably a better thing to deal with scope on. Is that true?
I absolutely agree with you. All right. Because people do have access, right? It's like in car buying where, 50 years ago, the car dealers had all of the leverage because we had no information. Now we have the internet and we can figure out what every bolt and add-on the car is going to cost. So, it's really limited their ability. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of process issues in the construction process, right? That the contractor.
So I think negotiating time is good, because what's that worth? Negotiating anything they can't price on the internet is good, because you can't get like framing a door, moving a wall, that kind of thing. But I think you're right. Anything that they can go now, which have access, used to have access to, is do that. Now, one thing that comes up, and maybe can help our people here, is that they say, well, I want to buy my own stove, my own refrigerator, my own appliances. And I usually come back and say, well, I can't warranty the appliances because I didn't put them in or something. Is that?
Mm-hmm. And you can also, I'm guessing, say, well, there's going to be, an installation fee around these things that is going to be higher than if I were to get you the appliances myself, because there's unknowns for me about, you get a fridge and it's slightly bigger than I expected it to be, and now I have to do some rework. So the installation is going to be more costly than had I ordered. So you can do that. Certainly do those kind of things.
Right. So I know sometimes you're negotiating. I mean, one of the things that I find for leverage, maybe because an opinion here, is that if you buy your own windows or you buy your own whatever, I can't warranty it, because let's say you buy a dishwasher from Home Depot. And the dishwasher leaks. It leaks on the floor. It messes up the floor. The floors goes to pretty soon we got a $10,000 mistake because the dishwasher leaked. I'm going to say, not my fault. I didn't install the dishwasher.
Right. So then when you carve out the warranty, is it about just the dishwasher or any damage resulting from the dishwasher? That's where you have to be very careful in how you're wording.
So I think my argument for people is we have to do everything or we can't warranty the whole thing. My insurance doesn't cover it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the way to do it.
And, it's interesting because depending on the sophistication of the client, they might just agree to that. But here's the thing, and this is a big part of negotiation. You might have contractors who are nervous to say that, right? Because they're afraid that the other person will disagree. It'll create conflict. They won't want to give them the job. By the way, everything you do in negotiation involves risk, right? If you say that about the warranty, that involves the risk of the client being turned off and saying, no, I don't want to work with you. If you don't say that, then you incur the risk of damages that you have to pay for. So anything you do involves risk, and you're always trying to manage the risk by saying, okay, of these risks, which is the one I want to take more.
So do you find that contractors in general are risk adverse in negotiation?
First of all, I find that people are risk averse, but yes, I think contractors are often very risk averse, especially when it comes to clients, potentially less so when it comes to subs. But when it comes to clients, they're both risk averse and conflict averse.
So how do you teach a contractor how to negotiate a price
with a client? What step? You go in the room and do that kind of thing. What other tricks and tips, so to speak, do you give contractors in the negotiating skills?
Well, the first 2 words I would want to leave you with are slow down. I think that one of the things that happens, especially once the conversation begins, is people start tightening up and they start rushing through the negotiation. So whatever the client will say is likely to provoke an emotional reaction in you. And you don't want to be reactive, because that's when you agree to things you later regret. That's when you say things that offend. So whatever comes at you, the first thing you need to do is listen to it, breathe, slow down, give yourself time to kind of regain your balance, and then respond strategically. And the way I would say it is, imagine it wasn't you in that situation. Imagine that you were like coaching a friend. What would you suggest to that friend to say? And very often,
take it personally. I imagine that's a problem sometimes, right?
And it's so hard to do, though, right? If somebody says, "Oh, the kitchen's ugly, I don't want to pay for it," it's like, how do you not take that personally? You built that, right? So it takes,
like the cabinets have this little mark on them. The typical thing that contractors go through is there's like a couple marks on the cabinet. One cabinet squeaks, and they say, "Well, I'm not going to pay $50,000 because there's a squeak and a mark." Right.
So, the first thing you need to do is just get a hold of your own emotions, because it's very easy to just get reactive and say, "No, you're going to pay for it." And now you have this argument with this client that's likely to escalate.
So how does it, when it goes from a negotiation to an argument, where's that shade of gray when it slips from one to the other? How do you know? You get emotionally involved. How does it become an argument from a negotiation?
So what is your purpose? I mean, I think the biggest difference between negotiation and argument is the purpose. The purpose of an argument is to convince the other person that they're wrong and you're right.
Okay.
Right. The purpose of a negotiation is to find a solution that works for both parties. That's a very different goal.
But how, you notice sometimes it's so that when it slides from one to the other, which it does sometimes, how do you stop it when is it when you get like you feel the gut in your gut, you're getting angry? Or how do you know when it's sliding from a negotiation, which is something that's good for both parties, to I'm right and you're wrong?
So that's where the slowing down is so important, because in the moment, you're just going to react emotionally, and that's going to turn into an argument. But step away, go outside, come back in, give yourself a moment, breathe, and then you're much more likely to respond in a way that's productive. If someone said to me, "And look, I'm not going to pay for these $50,000 for these cabinets because there's a scratch and a squeak," after I got a hold of my own emotions, then I would say to them, "So it sounds like you're really concerned about this mark and the squeak. Before we talk about anything else, what other concerns do you have about the cabinets?" And if they say,
I'm going to go, "It's all about the mark and the squeak. I'm going to look at that mark every day. I'm going to hear that squeak every day, and it's going to piss me off. And therefore, I'm going to hate these cabinets."
All right. So it sounds like aside from this mark and the squeak, you're happy with the cabinets. So
yeah, they're okay. But I know I'm going to look at the squeak every day, and I'm going to get mad.
So let's see what we can do about the squeak. And if we were able to resolve the squeak, would that go, would that go some of the way to alleviate your concerns?
Well, maybe the squeak, but there is the mark. I mean, and
right. So you'd like to address both.
Okay.
Right. You'd like to address both. Let's see if we can address the squeak first, because that's probably the easier problem to solve. And once we address that, let's look at the mark and see what we can do.
Okay. If you address the squeak, it would be better. But it's still not going to, somebody look at the mark every day.
Well, I want you to be happy with your kitchen. And it sounds like the squeak is a major concern for you. Let's see if we can address that. And then let's take a look at the mark together and see what we can do about that.
I want all the countertops replaced because I just look at the mark every day.
So it sounds like you have an issue with this mark. What is the issue with the rest of the countertops?
They're all attached. I have to look at the mark, and those are the countertops. And the mark is right next to the sink. I use the sink every day. I'm going to look at that big scratch and go, "Why did I pay all this money for this kitchen?" and get angry. And I don't want to get angry at my kitchen.
So this is where I can't really respond that well because I'm not a contractor and I don't know what
Right.
can be done about the mark.
So, what my thought is, sometimes if a contractor says, I've had it work, look at, put a price on that mark. Well, $500 or pick a number, right? Something that they'd rather have the money, and it's not the whole 50,000. Sometimes it's like, okay, because sometimes literally you can't fix the mark. It's like in the countertop. You're not going to fix it, right?
Okay.
So you have to like go, okay, let's put a value on the mark, not the whole thing. And then let's come up, maybe it's $1,500, but it's still, if you can get people to go there, sometimes that works. Okay. Take off $1,000, I'm good. So interesting.
Right.
So,
and you notice that when we were talking, my approach was very much to listen to you,
right.
to play back to you what you were telling me, and then suggest a path forward. And that's not an argument. That's really looking.
That sounds like something you would learn in marriage counseling. Like, I hear what you say. I've heard that before. Tell me what you're really thinking, right? Kind of like a response, right? Because it is sort of marriage. It is counseling. It is.
Skills are very, very similar in that way. Yeah, and that's why I said the first skill of negotiation is listening. Another one is managing emotions on both sides of the table. Telling people to calm down is not helpful, but helping them calm down is incredibly helpful. And
so if your voice is starting to raise and they're getting angry, look at, I paid for this, or you're 6 months late or whatever. And I'm really something that they did. I don't think I should pay for the whole thing because you're like 3 months late and I'm sorry, but those 3 months. In fact, I had one, this is a true story. You ruined my move-in process. I was set to this wonderful move-in, and because there was stuff hanging around, I planned for, it's like a wedding or something. I planned for moving into my home, and it was a mess. I was emotionally distraught, and I think you owe me $50,000 for pain and suffering because my move-in experience wasn't what I expected. This is a real story.
Right. So the first thing you need to do is validate the other person. You say, so you were hoping for a certain move-in experience.
Right.
And it sounds like the construction process and the 3-month delay impacted that, and you're upset about that.
Yeah, I was really disappointed. I mean, I'd fantasized for months about what the movement was gonna be like. And it was a disaster. I was very disappointed.
And it's hard sometimes when things are very different from the picture you had in your mind about how they're going to be, and you feel like you want some compensation for that.
I said $20,000. That's what I think it's worth. It was a mess, and that's a number that came to my mind.
So, I'm hearing you say you want $20,000. Can you tell me more about how you got to that figure?
My wife and I discussed it, and we figured out you had to put a number on it. And so we talked about it and said 20 grand seems fair for the pain and suffering we endured in this move-in process.
So you want some compensation that would help you feel whole after this whole thing.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I was, it was emotionally draining. It was a pain in the butt. I didn't like it, and I wanted compensated for my, emotional damage, which is not good. We were disappointed for like a month. It was terrible.
So, I'm happy to talk about how we can work together to make you feel better about this process. Okay. I can also tell you that what I have in my mind is not $20,000.
What do you have in your mind?
So again, I don't know enough about this process.
I know, but it's funny. It's funny mostly because these are real things that happen. These are not. I'm not making these up, right? I've worked with lots of clients, and I mean, the latest one last week, one of my clients is owed $75,000, and they're not going to pay him because the screens don't fit right. It's insane. But you're right; they got there. I mean, I tell my contractors that never get in a position where you can't walk, because that may happen at any time. So never be ahead. I mean, never let them get that far ahead of you financially.
Right. That's a huge problem, because a lot of times you're trying to make them happy, right? So you don't want to delay the process further, but they haven't paid you. So you just keep working.
Well, the other thing is, it becomes like the thing is like, well, if I stop now, then I'm going to mess up the whole dominant. Like then this can't happen because everybody's schedule is going to get messed up. If I can't, frame it, then I can't do the roofing and blah, and it messes everything up. So I have my schedule. So it's more important to be on my schedule than worry about getting paid, which I think is a mistake. They do that.
I think it is a mistake, and I think you need to document that. So if you decide to hold things up, before you do that, you send a letter to the client and you say, I can't proceed until you pay me this amount. Until I get paid this amount, this is going to delay the process of this project, and delaying it by this much will cause those consequences. So
there's always the lien thing, which is they always file it too late, right? They threaten to file a lien, and by that time the person's not going to sell a house. It doesn't matter. So those kind of things that like file lien, they don't want to file lien because they don't want to upset the client because they want to get paid. So it's a catch-22, right?
Yeah. Look, I was a client, right? We had a kitchen renovation. It took about 2 months longer than we anticipated. And, we were okay with it. It was, it turns out that once they opened things up, things were a lot messier than they expected them to be. And that's fine. Nobody knows what's behind the walls or under the floor until they open them up. And we were cool about it. My wife's an architect, so she was kind of prepped us for like these kind of things happen. But part of that is setting up those expectations with the clients, so they're not blindsided. And if you promise them, so a lot of times I've seen this, that people overpromise because they're trying to get the work.
It's overpromise and underdeliver. Welcome to construction, right?
Right. And that is inherently problematic. So, I really appreciate when contractors are honest with me and they say, here's our optimistic schedule. Here's a realistic schedule based on, and if we discover these other things, this could be the schedule. Right. Now, at least I'm prepared for it emotionally. I'm not going to be as angry because they told me 4 months when really it could be up to 8.
Right. I think things literally they cost twice as much and takes twice as long. That's a construction story, right? But usually I've hardly ever seen a project ever, and I've been doing this for 40 years, is actually on time and on budget. That's weird. In most projects run considerably over cost wise and pretty much always over time wise.
Well, and I think the fundamental reason for that is because you're in a competitive market. And when you bid on things, if you cost the most or take the longest, other people are going to get the job.
Right.
But I also think that there's a reputational thing to being the contractor who is closest to delivering what they promised. Right. You get a reputation in the market, and if other people mess people up by being consistently very late and very behind, if you have more integrity and you say, look, other people will tell you this takes 4 months. Really? I've never seen it done in less than 6. Some people will hire you and it'll still, won't hire you and it'll still take them 6 to 8 months to finish the job.
Right.
Other people will hear, this guy said 6 and those other people said 4 and delivered 6. Maybe, we should go to this guy. And
one of the frustrations is that I've worked this on years, and a lot of clients, they'll be bidding against an architect will take 3 bids or whatever. And my client will say, look, if this is going to cost $1.5 million, it's going to take 1.5 years or whatever. And the other guy says, no, I can do it for, $1.2 million, and it's going to take 8 months. So they go with $1.2 million in 8 months. 9 times out of 10, you talk to the architect later and say, yeah, it did actually cost $2 million and took 2 years, but everybody's fine with that. Right? And that really upsets my clients. Well, I told you, but I think part of that negotiation is your ability to negotiate more time and more money, because if they feel good at the end, even though it was $2 million and did 2 years, you're good. Right? That's
right.
The negotiation thing.
So part of it, by the way, comes to relationship building with the architects. And we got our contractor through our architect, right? Mm-hmm. And by developing relationships with architects, you also are less likely to fall into that position to begin with.
Right.
So, people want to work with people they trust. People want to work with people that, to the best of their abilities, keep to their word. But the other thing is, nothing gives you more power in a negotiation. I think you alluded to this before, than the ability and willingness to walk away. So you need to think about at every point in the process, what are my alternatives? If this doesn't work out, what am I going to do instead?
Mm-hmm.
And that's where not accruing the huge unpaid bills, because that makes it really hard to walk away.
Right.
And if you can
You end up with
try
the
to,
mediator like you, and I've had that happen before, which is never fun.
right, exactly. And I'm not that mean. I'm a very nice person, and I try to be ethical. That doesn't mean I don't negotiate hard. That doesn't mean that I don't try to achieve my objectives. But I try to do it in a way that people will actually want to do business with me going forward anyway. Right. I mean, there are. I imagine you built a house for someone, and they screwed you, and now they're building, a lake house, and they come back to you. You'd never work with them again.
Right.
Right. So, I want to be the person that I may have negotiated a good deal, but you're okay with it because it was still good enough for you.
Mm-hmm.
But you'll come back to me because I negotiated with integrity, and I think that's really important.
Cool. Well, Moshe, this has been incredibly valuable. I appreciate your time. I think it's something every contractor should take as a course in negotiation, but a lot of them won't. But in case they decide to be smart and take it, how do they get a hold of you?
So, one of the easiest ways to get a hold of me is just to email me. It's Moshe, Moshe, at negotiatingtable.com. You can also go to my website, which is negotiatingtable.com. I'm very active on LinkedIn. So just look for Moshe Cohen negotiation, and I'm all over LinkedIn. I do offer public workshops where people can sign up and take a Zoom workshop with me. I offer those a couple times a year. And for bigger firms, I often will go in-house and give them a training for their salespeople, their project managers, their supervisors, anybody who they want to train.
I personally think people need negotiating skills more than they need sales skills, because there's a lot of sales training out there, and that's sales training is good, but what happens is they may make better at selling, but they don't negotiate well and end up, losing money on the other side.
Right. The other plug I'd like to make is that, you should read books about negotiation. There's good books, there's good video courses. My book is called Collywobbles: How to Negotiate When Negotiating Makes You Nervous. And it really speaks to the intersection of negotiation and emotional intelligence. How can you negotiate well in practice, even when the other party is putting you under pressure and you feel like your emotions are starting to kick in?
I assume I can get that on Amazon, right?
Definitely Amazon, or if you prefer to listen, you can get it on Audible.
Okay, cool. That sounds great. Well, thanks a lot, Moshe. I really appreciate it, and very informative. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Paul, for inviting me.